The sound of the captain's voice crackled through the cabin speakers, low but steady, and it carried a message no one ever wants to hear mid-flight.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to a technical issue, we will be diverting to Beykersfield Airport. Please remain calm and seated.
For a moment, silence swallowed the cabin. Then came the anxious shuffle of passengers shifting in their seats, craning their necks, trying to catch a glimpse of what might be happening outside the oval windows. A child clutched his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Are we crashing?" The mother forced a smile she didn't feel and whispered back, "No, sweetie, it's just a little change." The jet dipped, the engines hummed with a slightly different tone, and everyone's hearts seemed to climb into their throats. Bakersfield wasn't Los Angeles. It wasn't San Francisco. To many on board, it wasn't anything at all. Just a name they had heard on the radio during traffic updates. And now, it was the place where their plans, their business meetings, their family reunions would all be disrupted. Amid this swirl of nerves sat a man in a plain cap, black jacket, and worn jeans. He looked unbothered, almost amused, as if life had just tossed him another script to improvise. His name, though many passengers hadn't noticed yet, was Keanu Reeves. The landing came hard, the wheels squealing as the plane connected with the shorter runway of the regional airport. A collective sigh of relief washed through the cabin when the brakes finally eased. But relief turned quickly into frustration. Bakersfield was 2 hours away from Los Angeles. There would be no quick transfer, no first-class lounge, no limousines lined up at the gate. The airline had little to offer but apologies. Passengers stood in clusters, muttering about refunds, about taxis, about their bad luck. Bakersfield's small terminal was ill-equipped for a full load of stranded travelers, and confusion grew by the minute. It was then that the man in the cap removed his earbuds, looked around, and did something no one expected. "All right," Keanu said, his voice even, almost cheerful. "Looks like we're in this together. Let's figure out how to get to LA." Heads turned. Some gasped in recognition. A few even chuckled nervously, unsure if this was a prank. But no, it was him, the star they had seen dodge bullets in The Matrix and battle demons in John Wick. And here he was, stuck in Bakersfield, just like them. Instead of vanishing into a private car, Keanu began talking with the airline staff, pressing for options. He discovered that buses ran from Bakersfield to Los Angeles. Not glamorous, but dependable. And while others complained, he began organizing. "Hey, if anyone wants to ride together, there's a bus leaving in about 30 minutes, he called out. "Not luxury, but it'll get us home." People stared. Some nodded uncertainly, others exchanged glances. Slowly, a group gathered near him, drawn less by the logistics and more by the calm authority in his tone. It felt absurd, John Wick as their travel agent, but somehow it made perfect sense. Keanu walked with the group toward the waiting bus, not striding ahead like a leader, but mingling, carrying luggage for an elderly woman, helping a man wrestle his guitar case into the undercarriage. Passengers pulled out phones, snapping photos, but he didn't shy away. Instead, he struck up conversations. On board, he settled into a seat not at the front, not in the back, but among the others, cracking open a bottle of water and sighing with the same exhaustion everyone felt. But then came the stories. He began reading aloud from his phone about Bakersfield, little trivia nuggets about the town's famous country music scene, its local cuisine, its quirky roadside attractions. His deep, measured voice rolled through the bus like a warm blanket, and laughter followed when he threw in dry jokes. "Apparently, the best thing to do here is leave," so we're already doing it right. The bus rumbled down the highway and the mood transformed. What had begun as panic in the cabin shifted into camaraderie on wheels. Passengers smiled, chatted, even sang along when Keanu pulled up some country tunes on his playlist. The stranger's nightmare delay had become a bizarre kind of adventure. And it was thanks to one man who refused to act like a star above it all. By the time the bus crested the final hills and the lights of Los Angeles glittered in the night, the group felt like they had shared something unforgettable. They weren't just stranded passengers anymore. They were witnesses to the rarest of Hollywood scripts. A leading man who didn't leave the set when the cameras stopped. The bus hissed to a stop in downtown Los Angeles, its brakes squealing as the weary passengers stretched their legs and gathered their bags. For most, the night was finally over. They would go home with stories of inconvenience, maybe a funny anecdote about being stranded in Beykersfield. But for those who had shared the ride with Keanu Reeves, the story felt larger, stranger, almost cinematic. Phones had been out the entire journey, of course. Videos of Keanu lugging luggage, chatting casually, even reading trivia about Beykersfield were already uploaded before the bus reached Los Angeles. By dawn, clips were racing across Twitter and Instagram, then spilling into Facebook feeds and YouTube compilations. The headlines wrote themselves: Keanu Reeves stuck on bus after emergency landing. Hollywood star organizes rescue ride. The nicest guy in Hollywood again. Users online responded with the same mixture of awe and affection. This man is literally John Wick, and Bill and Ted rolled into one. And yet, he rides a bus like the rest of us. One person posted. Another wrote, imagine being stressed from an emergency landing, and Keanu Reeves starts reading you Beykersfield facts. That's not a delay. That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. News outlets picked it up quickly, each trying to outdo the other with clever headlines. Entertainment blogs praised his humility. Lifestyle writers called him an example of how celebrities should behave. And even serious news stations found space for a 2-minute segment about the actor turned impromptu tour guide. The videos didn't just show a celebrity among civilians. They showed something deeper, something rare. There was no entourage, no manager shielding him from photos, no attempt to rush away. Just Keanu, laughing softly, balancing an old woman's duffel bag, crouching to help a teenager shove his skateboard into the luggage hold. One particular clip went viral. Keanu leaning forward in his seat, holding out his phone, explaining, Beykersfield is actually known as the birthplace of the Beykersfield Sound, a style of country music in the 1950s. The camera caught the smiles around him, the chuckles at his deadpan delivery, and the surreal contrast of a Hollywood action star reading Wikipedia facts on a cramped bus. Commenters marveled, he's more real than most of my co-workers. Another joked, forget the Oscars, give him a Greyhound Bus Award. Soon, late-night comedians were riffing on it. Keanu Reeves was stranded in Beykersfield and rode a bus with strangers. One host quipped, meanwhile, I won't even carpool with my neighbor. The audience roared, but beneath the jokes was admiration. For Reeves, this wasn't a calculated PR move. He had no photographer staging candid shots, no publicist posting carefully worded captions. His reputation as the nicest guy in Hollywood had been building for years, but it wasn't born in boardrooms. It was built on small, genuine acts. Giving up his subway seat, chatting with homeless people, quietly donating millions from his movie paychecks to children's hospitals. This bus ride was simply another page in a growing legend. For the passengers, the experience lingered far beyond and the headlines. A young woman later wrote on her blog, When the plane landed in Beykersfield, I thought my world was falling apart. I had to be in LA for a job interview the next morning. But riding that bus, listening to Keanu Reeves crack jokes, reminded me that sometimes the worst day can become the best story. An elderly man told his grandson, "You know that Matrix guy? He carried my suitcase." The boy didn't believe him until the video surfaced online. Suddenly, Grandpa's tale became proof that kindness and humility could still exist at the highest levels of fame. In Hollywood, where scandals and arrogance often dominate headlines, the bus ride stood out like a beacon. It wasn't about box office numbers or red carpets. It was about presence. A man who could have walked away, choosing instead to stay, to share inconvenience, to lighten the mood for strangers. And perhaps that's why the story resonated so deeply. Because everyone knows the gap between the famous and the ordinary feels unbridgeable. But in that moment, in that crowded bus barreling down the California freeway, the gap closed. The celebrity and the passengers were equals, tired, stranded, but laughing together. By the end of the week, memes had spread. Photoshopped posters appeared online with titles like Speed 3 Bakersfield Blues, featuring Keanu behind the wheel of a Greyhound. Others simply captioned images of him on the bus. "You're breathtaking." Even in Bakersfield, the man himself, true to form, made no big statement. He gave no interviews, issued no press release. He simply continued with his schedule, filming, traveling, living quietly. For him, it was just another day, another chance to be decent. But for the world, it was proof yet again that sometimes the smallest choices, sitting down among strangers, sharing a laugh, carrying a bag, can ripple outward, shaping how millions see you. And so, the legend of Keanu Reeves grew a little larger, not with explosions on screen, but with kindness on a bus. Long after the bus rolled into Los Angeles and passengers melted into the night, the story refused to fade. It had already taken root in a place far bigger than Bakersfield or a Twitter feed. It became part of the ongoing mythos of Keanu Reeves. For years, the world had been quietly building this image of him, the accidental saint of Hollywood. And unlike so many others in the industry, the evidence was overwhelming, scattered across decades, stitched together by strangers. It began with subway footage. A shaky phone video, posted anonymously, showed Keanu sitting in a crowded New York train. No sunglasses, no entourage. Just him. When a woman carrying a large bag stepped aboard, he glanced up, rose without hesitation, and offered her his seat. Simple. Ordinary. Yet in the world of actors chauffeured in black SUVs, the image of a blockbuster star standing in a subway car rippled across the internet. Then there were the donations, whispered about but rarely publicized. Crew members on The Matrix spoke of how Keanu gifted them Harley-Davidson motorcycles as thank you presents, each one worth thousands of dollars. Later, insiders revealed he quietly funneled millions of his earnings into children's hospitals and cancer research. When pressed, he never bragged, never put his name on a foundation. "It's the right thing to do," was all he said. Stories piled up like bricks in a cathedral of goodwill. Fans recounted bumping into him at coffee shops, where he would linger in conversation rather than brushing them off. A traveler once shared how Keanu, standing in line at an airport, asked about his book and ended up discussing philosophy for 20 minutes. A grieving family wrote about how he signed memorabilia for them, then stayed to hear about their late father, who had been a huge fan. The bus ride from Bakersfield wasn't an outlier. It was a continuation, another note in a song the public already knew by heart. Keanu Reeves doesn't play humble, he lives it, and that authenticity was what made him so different. Hollywood had no shortage of good deeds from celebrities, often accompanied by glossy photo spreads or perfectly timed interviews. A superstar would visit a hospital, and the photos would appear instantly in magazines. An actor would donate to charity, and their publicist would issue a statement. These gestures, however noble, often felt choreographed, wrapped in the sheen of marketing. But when people saw Keanu lugging an old woman's suitcase or reading facts about Beykersfield to tired strangers, there was no script, no lighting crew, no announcement, just a man caught in the moment, doing what decency demanded. Even the way he carried himself in interviews reinforced the legend. While other stars basked in glamour, Keanu always seemed slightly out of place, answering softly, sometimes awkwardly, as though embarrassed by the attention. Asked once about his reputation as the nicest guy in Hollywood, he simply shrugged. "I don't know about that. I just try to be respectful." Respect. That was the thread weaving through every story. Respect for crew members who built the sets, respect for fans who waited hours outside premieres, respect for strangers stranded in an airport far from home, and respect is what people crave in a world that too often feels dismissive and harsh. Watching Keanu, they saw not just an actor, but a possibility. Proof that decency could coexist with fame, that kindness could outlast cynicism. The Beykersfield bus became a parable. Articles didn't just retell what happened, they placed it alongside everything else he had done. Headlines read, "From motorcycles to buses, Keanu Reeves keeps showing up." Opinion pieces declared him a counterweight to celebrity arrogance. For the passengers who lived it, the memory only grew sweeter with time. One woman told reporters months later, "It wasn't just that he helped us. It was how normal he made it feel. He didn't act like a savior. He acted like a neighbor." And that sentiment echoed online, where fans shared their own brushes with the actor. One user tweeted, "Meeting Keanu is like meeting the opposite of Hollywood. He looks you in the eye. He listens." Thousands agreed. The bus story, then, wasn't just a viral clip. It was evidence, stacked on top of years of similar tales, that the legend was true. And in an age where authenticity is rare, the truth made people hold on even tighter. By the time the next blockbuster trailer for John Wick dropped, comment sections were filled not just with excitement for the action, but with jokes about Greyhound buses and Beykersfield trivia. Keanu's movies weren't just entertainment anymore. They were extensions of a man people genuinely admired. In the end, it wasn't the flames of an explosion on screen that immortalized him. It was a quiet bus ride, a cracked joke, a hand steadying a stranger's luggage. The hero of fiction revealed once again the hero of flesh and blood. Memes have a strange power. They can take a fleeting moment, a face, a phrase, a snapshot in time, and give it a life far longer than the event itself. That was exactly what happened after the Beykersfield bus ride. Within days, Twitter feeds overflowed with doctored images. One showed Keanu at the wheel of a bus, passengers clinging to their seats, with the caption, "Speed 3, Beykersfield Drift." Another depicted him holding up a smartphone, reciting Beykersfield trivia with the words, "History class I would actually attend." The photos were funny, yes, but they carried an undercurrent of affection. Nobody was mocking him. They were celebrating him, turning his decency into a cultural inside joke that millions wanted to share. And it wasn't the first time. Years earlier, An image of Keanu sitting alone on a park bench, hunched over a sandwich, had swept across the internet under the tag, Sad Keanu. Most celebrities would have bristled, demanding the photo be taken down. Keanu didn't. When asked about it, he simply smiled and said, "You know, sometimes I'm just eating a sandwich." That shrug, simple, unbothered, only deepened the public's affection. Now the bus memes joined the canon. Comment sections filled with lines like, "I'd miss my flight any day if Keanu was on my bus," or "Bakersfield should build him a statue." Even local businesses in Bakersfield got in on the joke, tweeting offers like, "Keanu, next time the bus stops here, lunch is on us." This ripple of humor became something more, a collective reaffirmation that his reputation was no accident. Each meme, each comment, stitched the story deeper into popular culture. The nicest guy in Hollywood title hardened into something like folklore. Why did it matter so much? Perhaps because audiences had grown weary of scandals. Week after week, headlines blared about celebrities arrested for DUIs, berating waitstaff, or demanding absurd luxuries. Against that backdrop, the image of a man who could headline blockbuster franchises yet willingly ride a cramped bus with strangers felt like an antidote. It tapped into nostalgia, too. Once, movie stars had seemed larger than life, perched on pedestals. But here was one stepping down, sitting shoulder to shoulder with ordinary people. In a world where trust in fame was fading, Keanu represented a different model. Not untouchable idol, but approachable companion. The cultural meme gave people a shorthand. To say, "That's such a Keanu move," was to describe kindness without spectacle, humility without performance, a boss who unexpectedly rolled up his sleeves to help employees clean up after an event. A Keanu move, a neighbor who stayed late to fix someone's flat tire. Keanu energy. His name became less a label and more a verb. And Hollywood noticed. Publicists for other actors began trying to engineer random acts of kindness moments, hoping to capture some of the Reeves magic. Paparazzi conveniently caught stars handing food to the homeless or hugging fans outside hotels. But audiences were sharper now. They could smell the staging. They rolled their eyes at the glossy setups, contrasting them with the grainy, unpolished videos of Keanu lugging suitcases in Bakersfield. The bus legend also became part of fan culture at conventions. At Comic-Con panels, fans shouted Bakersfield jokes from the crowd, and Keanu, grinning, would sometimes nod or laugh along. It was a shared language, a wink between him and the people who followed his journey. Years later, interviews still circled back to that night. "Why didn't you just get your own ride?" journalists would ask. His answer never changed. "We were all in the same situation. Why would I leave?" That "why would I leave" line stuck. It became quoted, reprinted, tweeted, engraved on fan art. In an age of exit strategies, the man chose to stay. And in that simple act, he reflected a yearning many people carried. The desire for leaders, celebrities, anyone in power, to remain present when things got difficult. The Bakersfield story turned into more than gossip. It was a cultural touchstone. A moment people returned to whenever they needed proof that decency could survive fame. Like a folk tale, it spread far beyond those who had witnessed it firsthand. Parents told it to children, teachers used it in classrooms, pastors slipped it into sermons. For the passengers on that bus, it had been just a strange, lucky night. For the rest of the world, it became legend. Not the kind written in scripts or choreographed in marketing meetings, but the kind that grows organically, fed by laughter, awe, and gratitude. And that's why, years after the tires cooled and the jokes had run their course, the story still lived. Because every retelling wasn't just about Keanu Reeves. It was about hope. The hope that goodness, once revealed, could ripple outward, becoming something larger than any one person. The legend of the Beykersfield bus ride didn't end when the memes faded or when journalists moved on to fresher headlines. It lived on because people needed it to. In a world spinning with chaos, cynicism, and constant reminders of selfishness, the image of a man who chose to stay, who chose to ride with strangers rather than rise above them, carried a rare kind of comfort. For many, Keanu Reeves came to embody something larger than an actor or a celebrity. He was proof that humility could thrive even under the blinding spotlight of fame. His films drew audiences, but it was his humanity that bound them to him long after the credits rolled. People came for John Wick or The Matrix, but they stayed for the stories whispered by strangers. The autograph given quietly, the subway seat offered, the motorcycle gifted to a crew member, the bag carried for an old woman on a dark Bakersfield night. And in that, the bus became more than a vehicle. It was a metaphor. It symbolized the journey we all take together, uncertain, inconvenient, filled with detours. Life has a way of rerouting us, landing us in places we never planned to be. In those moments, most people hope for someone steady, someone who doesn't abandon ship, someone who helps shoulder the burden. On that night, for those passengers, it was Keanu Reeves. But for the millions who heard the story later, it became a reminder that kindness is not bound by status. A movie star could share the same cramped seat, the same plastic bottle of water, the same nervous laughter as anyone else. Fame did not strip away his ability to be human. In fact, it seemed to sharpen it. Sociologists sometimes speak of folk heroes, figures who, through stories passed from person to person, become symbols of values a community longs to preserve. In a quiet, almost accidental way, Keanu had become one. Not because he sought the role, but because he lived it when no one expected him to. Years later, passengers still told their version. Each remembered different details. The way he joked about Bakersfield trivia, the way he handled luggage, the calm in his voice when others panicked. None of their recollections were identical, but all carried the same core. He stayed, and that word, stayed, resonated deeper than perhaps any action hero scene could. Because staying is harder than leaving. Staying requires patience, humility, and a willingness to share in discomfort. It meant he wasn't above the moment. He was inside it, fully, with the rest of them. The legend rippled outward into countless small gestures by ordinary people inspired to act differently. A man on a subway gave up his seat and later joked online, "Channeling my inner Keanu." A woman stayed behind after her office closed to help a janitor clean, explaining to a friend, "Why would I leave?" His example had become language, a lens through which people measured their own choices. Even Bakersfield itself leaned into the myth. Local guides began pointing out the airport as the place where Keanu Reeves once rode a bus like the rest of us. Souvenir shops printed shirts. "I got stranded in Bakersfield, and all I got was this Keanu story." What could have been remembered only as a mishap became part of the city's charm. But the truest measure of the legend wasn't in memes or merchandise. It was in the way people spoke about him, with a warmth usually reserved for old friends. When Keanu's name trended online, it wasn't just because of a movie trailer or a scandal. It was because someone, somewhere, had retold the bus story, and millions leaned in to hear it again, like children begging for a favorite bedtime tale. In an age where trust in institutions falters and headlines are filled with betrayals, the story endured because it promised something simple: that integrity still exists, that even in the dizzying heights of fame, a man could sit on a rattling bus and choose to belong, not to escape. For the passengers, the night ended in Los Angeles. But for the rest of us, the journey continues. Every time the story is retold, it climbs aboard another bus, across screens, across generations, across the weary miles of our own lives. And each time, it delivers the same message. True heroes don't always wear costumes or wield weapons. Sometimes they carry luggage, share trivia, and laugh with strangers in the dark. That is why the Beykersfield bus ride will not be forgotten. Not because it was dramatic or extraordinary, but because it was ordinary, made luminous by decency. And in that ordinariness, people found hope. So when the name Keanu Reeves comes up in conversation, it is not just about the films, or the box office, or the awards. It is about a man on a bus, reminding us that greatness is not about rising above others. It is about riding beside them,